Phil Spencer's doing a quick media round. Here's what you need to know. Welcome back, friends, and our good buddy, Mr. Phil Spencer, is doing a small media round, and he was talking to some folks over at IGN. Ryan, he actually did a pretty good interview, but I'm going to pull out the highlights here because, well, if you don't have the whole hour, which I do recommend that you should go watch the whole interview if you want to get all the details, but if you don't have a whole hour or don't want to dedicate the time, here are some of the big items that Mr. Spencer talked about that shine just a little bit more light. Obviously, given the current environment with everybody working from home, shipping a console is actually pretty dang hard. I mean, they're trying to build not only hardware, but software, and they can't even be in the same room as their colleagues. That presents a very serious challenge to actually shipping a console and hardware and games and everything else on time. Now, Phil did say that they are still on track for a holiday release coming this fall or early winter, or however you want to look at it, more than likely this fall. They are still on track. Now, obviously, things can and will change, but for right now, everything is still on track. He's actually saying that the software is probably the bigger challenge right now than, say, the console itself, the actual hardware. So there's a lot of balls that are being juggled in the air. And he did say that they would not delay the console if certain games weren't ready, because there's been some talk about, hey, is Halo Infinite going to be ready for the launch? Now, depending on how you interpret what he's talking about, he may have been kind of hedging and saying, yeah, this might actually happen. I didn't quite get that sense. Go watch it for yourself. But what he would say is like, hey, we're not going to not launch the console because the Halo Infinite game is not ready because of everything that's been going on. But there are a lot of challenges right now. And there's also an interesting point too about how many games do you launch with a console? Because if you think about it, if somebody's going to go, and he didn't put it in this phrase, but here's kind of what I think he's getting at. He said, think about it when you launch games with a console. You can't have too many, because think about it. If you have a console, let's just say it's $500, $400. Somebody goes and buys that. How many $60 games are they going to buy at that time? It's a delicate balance between having the right mix of games, having enough games, but not having too many that some get lost in the launch hype or things that are going on. And so those titles just don't get washed over. So there's a balancing act that has to go on. And right now, Microsoft is balancing the hardware and software aspects. And then obviously Microsoft has a bunch of studios, and Phil had been going around talking to them up until the recent events. And so trying to get that balance of what games are going to be ready, when is it going to launch, and all that is still up in the air. You can tell that he actually quite said, we don't have a plan B yet. We're still many months away, and they're still working through the details. But for now, the console is still launching on time, no deviation as of yet, but there's a lot going on. Now, there were other talks about, what about like region launches? Remember, because Microsoft could just say, you know what, we're just going to launch it in the US and Canada, or pick your favorite countries, and then we'll roll out consoles to other regions. Well, that doesn't sound like that's a plan, because he actually notes that, hey, when you have region delays like that, it really hurts the momentum of the console sales. And so I don't think Microsoft would just, if it's up to Phil, it sounds like they're going to launch it worldwide as planned initially, unless something happens with supply constraints, because he makes it very clear that having delays and market launches is a big deal, especially when it's in terms of months. Now, there could be like days launching, launches in the US on a Tuesday and a Friday in the UK or something like that. But he was hinting more at like, hey, long launches months between launches is not going to help Microsoft win anything. He did confirm that the console, which we already knew, started back out in 2016. And when they did that, they heard certain characteristics they were trying to hit, and that includes a price point. Now, when it comes to pricing, he was not going to say an actual price, but he did hint that Microsoft has not set the price yet, right? They are very closely watching and monitoring what Sony is doing with the PlayStation 5, and that Microsoft has the correct pricing envelope in place to be able to hit certain price points. But it sounds like they are still being agile and flexible, and so it's looking like Microsoft might be a little bit more aggressive potentially on the pricing than we might expect. So don't get too excited yet, but it does look like Microsoft does have a couple tricks up their sleeve to keep the pricing somewhat flexible. So that is quite a good thing. Now, the big thing here was, obviously, Sony has announced the specs of the PlayStation 5, at least the raw specs. There might be some other things going on there, but the basic specs have now been out. And and I quote, says, I felt good about how the Series X lines up to the PS5. I mean, how could he not? He really does. He says, when we saw the public disclosure, I felt even better about the choices that we made on our platform. Remember, these choices that they made were many, many years ago, more than likely 2017, maybe 2018 at the latest, and then they kind of hedged their bets about where they're going to go with the console and the power and everything else, and he's very, very pleased, obviously. I mean, how could you not? You look at what Sony announced, you look at what Microsoft announced, and they pretty much have a clean sweep across the board in terms of raw performance at this time. So he's feeling quite good about that. Now, on the optical audio removal, Spencer hints that, hey, it's really, really low. Like the people that actually use it, I know that some people do use it, and there's actually some SKUs of headsets that use, like the Astros as a series, and they are working with those vendors to actually make sure that those peripherals will work on the next generation consoles purely over USB-C. So be looking on the lookout for an update from your hardware or headset manufacturer about how they are going to make that work. But it is possible to take your optical audio headset that works with the Xbox One X or whatever SKU you've got, and it will transfer over to the Series X, which is a good thing. Something interesting I found on the xCloud side is that Spencer actually sees xCloud playing a big role on the console itself, and this is an interesting approach. What he's talking about here is that with xCloud on a console, especially the Xbox, obviously, that it makes it very easy to jump in and try new games, which makes complete sense, right? You're browsing the Game Pass catalog, you see a title you want to try, rather than having to download that whole game like you have to do today to go play it and try it and see if you want to, basically play a whole bunch of it. You'll be able to just jump in through the xCloud version, and then if they want, they can download the assets in the background, or if you end up liking it, then you can download the full game. It's going to make it significantly easier to go get that trial experience that is honestly quite difficult to do today on a console, because you're, again, forced to download the entire game. On E3, which we've all been wondering what Microsoft's plans are on E3, you can tell that he's super bummed that E3 is not happening. We all know that that is the right approach. That is definitely the right approach, but Microsoft does have announcements lined up before and after that event, and be looking for those to be coming. He wouldn't explicitly say, hey, we're going to hold an event, because Microsoft can't. Actually, Microsoft announced this week, by the way, that they're canceling all in-person events pretty much from here on out through the end of the calendar year. So if Microsoft was going to hold an Xbox launch party, they really can't. Microsoft is not doing that. They're doing digital only events. They canceled their largest IT Pro event. They obviously canceled Build. They're not going to E3. They canceled Inspire, which is a partner conference. They're doing everything digitally. And so it's going to be, if they are going to have an Xbox launch event per se, it will be definitely digital only, which again is bummer, because I would have loved to have gone to that and, and experienced all that stuff. On the pre-order side, look for that to be late summer, or more than likely sometime this summer. Spencer, again, did not give an exact date. I think Microsoft is trying really carefully to figure out the pricing model for this device while working all remotely and dealing with all this stuff. And so it was a good interview. I mean, pricing is obviously, Microsoft looks like they're going to be aggressive. Pre-orders coming late this summer. xCloud on the console is going to make a lot of sense and appears to be a big part of it. Spencer is extremely bullish now, knowing what the PlayStation 5 specs are, that they've got the more powerful console. Software is the big issue, it sounds like, because from what I've heard previously is that Microsoft is getting close to pressing that go button to start kind of running these things off the manufacturing line, which makes sense why he would say that software is an issue. I'm pretty sure that hardware at this point is completely locked down, and now they're trying to build the initial base software that is going to be loaded onto all these consoles that come down the line. I can guarantee you there will be a day one update. No surprise there, but they've got to get that base image right so that there's no bugs to at least get to the update process when it comes off the factory line, which I can imagine is very stressful when nobody is working in an office together and you have limited testing environment. That's the other thing too, is they only had so many of these devices, and to ship them out to all their employees to try to get more testing data is a challenge. So I wish Microsoft the best of luck with all that, because we're all looking forward to a console launch this year, and I know we'll all be super bummed if it doesn't go according to plan. That's all we got for the interview, guys. Hit that subscribe button, and we'll catch all of you right back here next time.